Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Thousand Words Show. My name is Matt Addington. If you haven't been here before, it's just a place that I try to get together with other photographers, other people in the industry, out of the industry that like taking photos, like sharing photos, and like telling the stories that go along with it. I couldn't be more excited today to have my friend Jason Loftus on. Jason is one of the most accomplished wildlife photographers in the world, published all over the place. If you've ever been on Instagram and looked at wild animals, you've probably stumbled upon Untamed Images by JL, and Jason is just one of the best out there, and I couldn't be more grateful that you were that you're able to come on today, Jason, and just share some of your stories with me.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you having me on, Matt. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and thank you. Those are way too kind of words, man. I don't look at myself that way at all. I'm just a lucky guy that gets to go have these crazy adventures. So, you know.
Isn't that the truth? I mean, you hear it a lot. You were talking before we started recording about, running into somebody today that you had the conversation. Oh, you're so lucky you get to do this and you get to do that, and I hear that often as well. And we are blessed that this has provided a way for us to quote unquote work. It doesn't seem like work too often, and it's not always perfect, and it's not always blue skies and great animals and all of that. But we are lucky that we do get to share just some of the adventures all over the place. And you've been around the world and done great things with great animals all over. The Beyond the Wild podcast that Jason is one of the co-hosts of is just wildly successful on all the podcast platforms, talking wildlife and photography and conservation. And it's if you haven't subscribed to that one, we'll put a link in the show notes for sure, and make sure we talk a little bit about the podcast. But rewind a little bit and tell us, like, how did you get started with this? Where did the photography journey really begin with you?
Yeah. So for me, it really began, and some people may have heard this story, so I apologize if you have, but I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. But for me, my dad started taking me into the outdoors when I was a little kid, 3 years old. I kind of joke I was probably his little elk herd out there, probably stopped lots of opportunities from happening because he sacrificed and took me into the woods with him, right? And I'm super grateful to him for that, because he really is the one that introduced me to the outdoors and introduced me to how to have a love and a passion, respect for animals and wildlife and hunting and all that stuff. So, and then, just over the years, honestly, it just grew. And as I got older and was out there having those experiences, I just started wanting to capture those experiences and share them with people, right? And most of it wasn't animals at that point. It was mostly like the incredible sunrises and the cool storms and the lightning and just all the things that you get to experience, and all the sunrises and sunsets we get to see as hunters out in the outdoors. And that started it. And, I bought a little point and shoot, and that was like, yeah, this ain't working. Started doing some research, saw this whole DSLR concept out there, and thought, well, if I just get a real camera, then I should be able to get some better images. And jumped and took the leap and invested in I think it was a D5000 at the time. A Nikon D5000 was my first real camera, quote unquote. And had like a 70-300 lens and a wide angle that came with the kit, right?
The kit, yep, you bet.
Yep. And I was stoked, right? I mean, this is cat's meow, I'm set, right? So then I get out and go start taking photos and realize in a hurry that boy, oh boy, I had a lot to learn, because I was not making good images by any means. And I was just like, man, the frustration sat in. And then I just thought about it. I was like, listen, if you really want to do this, then you really need to stop just guessing, and you need to sit down and you need to figure this out and learn how to do it, right? So that's what really started it for me. And then I had a good friend, Bill Allard. Some of you may know who he is. I can't remember his name it's Bill Allard Wildlife on Facebook, I think. He's got a really large following there. Older gentleman, but a really good photographer and a great friend, and just somebody that kind of took me under his wing and started taking me out to like Antelope Island and just local places here in Utah. And as soon as I started capturing what I thought at the time was a decent image or two, the bug was there. It lit the fire. And so that was probably about 12 years ago now. And from then on, it's just, the rest is history. I just continued to learn and do the school of hard knocks through experience in YouTube University, and fortunate to have some friends along the way. Harlan Cooper is one I always mention, and some other folks that have just taught me the ins and outs, and kind of in a roundabout way, would make mentions to me, help critique photos, trying to teach me, in a roundabout way, not directly, but giving me hints and pointers. And it came a point where I could use them as a sounding board and to critique my images and be honest with me about what might or might not work, right? So,
Sure.
but yeah, that's how I got into it.
That's cool. And you talk about gear and all along the way, and I'm kind of laughing along with you with the kit lenses where you you think, man, this is a great deal. I'm getting 2 lenses and a body, and I'm not real sure what f5.6 is going to do, or what you thinking 300 millimeters. That's going to get me so close to these animals, and
Yeah.
and for a lot of people, that's the perfect setup, and for you and I to start out, and many others, that is the perfect setup. But it's funny how how you progress through things, and if you're like me, and I know you probably are, your appetite for perfection or for the ultimate in sharpness and quality, just it continues to grow. And as technology now has escalated and gone through the roof, it's we always want the next thing, the next best thing, the next flagship body, or the lens that's coming out. And all of those things being said, what do you find yourself thinking about when you're in the field? You've got an animal, whether it be an elk or a bear or a muskox or a polar bear, whatever it is. What's going through your head as you are sitting behind the camera? At that point, we're not thinking about, this is the camera body I've got, and I've got this lens. You're just kind of in the moment, and probably takes you all the way back to when you were a kid with your dad in the woods, the things that you observed and watched. What goes through your mind when you're sitting behind the camera in a lot of those scenarios?
It's a good question. I think, it's changed over time, to be honest with you. When I first started photographing deer, for example, mule deer, right? It's one of my favorite things to photograph. The first time I photographed a mule deer, I could have cared less if it was facing me. I could have cared less if the light was right. I could have cared less. I just wanted to get that photo. And I got a photo of a mule deer, and I was pumped. And then I realized that, okay, well, that's not a good photo. So now what do I got to do to make a good photo? And then that learning curve and transition changed over time. And I think I'm at a point now with my photography, and I wouldn't be surprised if this changes, that I'm really more I've photographed some of these animals for so many years, and I've gotten lots and lots of shots of bugle and elk, for example, and lots of shots of rutting mule deer and lip curls and all those cool things. And I'm not saying I'm not bragging by any means. I'm just saying I've had the experiences.
Sure.
And my portfolio is at a point where if I want to keep being creative and growing, I really start to think more when I'm in the field about what can I do different. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm gonna pull up to a situation or hike into a situation, whatever it might be, and I'm gonna try to get the portrait shot. I'm gonna try to get the main, like the key shots. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, got them. Yeah. Now, while everybody else's might just be blasting away at portraits and doing whatever the same thing and trying to get those bugles and whatever, I'm kind of scanning the landscape, looking for backdrops, looking for lighting situations, and do I need to move? Do I need to go to a different location and take this from a different angle? Do I want to try to include some cows in the image, for example, with elk? Do I want to, try to get him in a situation where he's in some dappled light and I can do some light play? Do I want to go backlit? Do I want to, what I mean? I'm really trying to take a situation now, I think, and look at it from a perspective of what can I do differently. I don't know if that answers your question, but try to make it mine and make it unique,
100%. And I ask because I find myself thinking about a lot of the same things. The bugling elk with the steam coming out of the mouth and all of those things. Those are epic shots. It's not you and I wouldn't call ourselves the first person in the world to ever see that happen,
right? To
get that shot, but I think I'm constantly thinking about similar things. What if we changed angles? What if where's the light? Trying to anticipate what might be happening. Is there going to be interactions between animals? And we were talking earlier, like we're a little bit as wildlife photographers, you become a little bit of biologist.
Yeah.
Thinking about what are these animals doing right now? It's this time of year where I'm going to anticipate that this might happen or that might happen, and we both, I know, chase great light all the time, and you love those amazing shots in the most amazing golden light, and those are things that you just kind of cross your fingers that you're going to get something cool that's going to happen. But
Yeah.
I find myself in those other times, because we don't get to photograph in perfect light with massive bulls and breath and all of these things. The epic stuff doesn't always happen. So what do you wrestle with the rest of the time? I just did a quick episode a week or so ago about turkeys, and how many gobbling turkeys and strutting turkeys and backlit, all of the things. And it was like I went at a really bad time of day, and I thought, what can I do that might just challenge me a little bit, that could be something different, that's not maybe the same shot that I've taken every spring for the last however many years. And trying to do some of those things to kind of challenge ourselves, I think is a great thing.
Yeah, I've been listening to some other podcasts. I really enjoy listening to other people talk about photography, and I like listening to landscape photographers, lifestyle photographers. I think if you're smart, we can all learn from everybody we come across. And I really try to keep my mind open to that. And I think my ideas about photography definitely change on a regular basis. And I heard a guy recently chatting about, he's a landscape guy, but he's like, I don't chase light, I chase art. And it's more like, I guess the way he was trying to explain it was, you can't expect to go places, especially if you're traveling the world to do photography, and expect the skies to always be insane, and expect
Exactly.
there to be right, and expect the light to always be right. But that doesn't mean that there's not an image to be taken, and that doesn't mean that there's not a photo to be taken, or a piece to be created, however you want to put it, right?
Yeah.
And so I really try to rethink about that. Like, for example, let's say I'm going to go to Katmai again this summer and do bears. And I'm pretty sure I won't get lucky enough to have the same kind of lighting situation I had last time I went. I mean, we had 3.5 out of 4 days of incredible sun and direct light, and the colors were just insane, and on and on. That's a very unrealistic expectation. So I'm already thinking about the lower light, the moody, what can I do with my edits? What kind of images am I going to chase with those different lighting situations? And I think it's kind of important to be intentional about that too. I think it's important to, like you just said, go out in the middle of the day and challenge yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, there are cool images to be had in the middle of the day. It may not be the quote unquote best light, but how did they say it? I'm going to screw this up. They said there's no such thing as bad light. I've heard that, and I'm not going to remember it now. Dang it, I shouldn't have even said it. There's no such there's no such thing as bad light. It's just bad use of light. Right? So light's always going to be there. It's how are you going to use the lights that's available to you?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So that's something that I haven't always, I've always been a chase the light kind of guy for sure. And don't get me wrong, that's the ideal. The golden hour stuff is incredible.
Yep.
But you see a lot of that, right? So what are you doing that's different? What are you doing to set yourself apart? There's a lot of ways to use light to your advantage, and it doesn't always have to be golden hour direct sunlight, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think sometimes, and I try to get my head wrapped around if it's the most epic light in the world, anybody with any camera can start shooting, and it's going to be a great photo. It's like people showing you their sunset photos on their phone, and it's like, yeah, I mean, of course that's going to be a great photo.
Right.
But when it isn't that epic light, I think I try to force myself to start looking at bits and pieces, and sometimes looking at the big picture, but going in and looking at just how tight can I get on an antler or an eye or something else that's happening, and thinking maybe a little bit more in terms of abstract when you don't have the great light to work with. So
Sure,
I think,
absolutely.
the quote that you just shared is awesome. I mean, you have to deal with what you got, and like you're saying, I think it's important though to anticipate Alaska, your trip. In fact, we'll show a couple of those images. The bear with the bright red salmon. That's a pretty eye candy type shot that you don't typically get You probably see more rainy, foggy shots in Alaska, but thinking ahead to, okay, what am I going to experience? How am I going to deal with what's probably going to be pretty stereotypical Alaska weather, and play through some of the things. When you go into a trip like you're talking about going to Katmai this summer, do you have you're obviously playing through situations and environments and weather and light and all those things. Do you ever go into stuff like that with a shot in mind, or a composition, or an animal behavior that you're kind of have on the checklist that you'd love to get?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's something I didn't used to do. I used to just show up and, spray and pray, so to speak, hope that something would work out. And I've learned over the years that it's really important to be intentional about what are you trying to capture. Because if you're not thinking about it. If you're not thinking about the shots you want, you're just going to be taking what is given to you. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Don't get me wrong. And again, please, I don't want to be, I'm not dogging on anybody. There's nothing wrong with copying images that you see. And there's nothing wrong with going and taking the exact same landscape shot that everybody else has taken. Go do you, go take your shot. But then I'm just challenging, I guess I'm at a point in my photography process and learning journey that I want to do those, and I still want to get those shots, but I also want to challenge myself to try to do something unique, right? So, but for yes, sure. Absolutely. I think it's important to go into the field with an idea of the types of shots you want to get. Some people, and I've been there, it's fun sometimes to just go in the field and take whatever Mother Nature gives to you. Like when I go to Yellowstone, I generally have an idea of the types of shots I want to get if I'm going in the winter. I want some frosty bison. I want some coyotes in the snow. I want a red fox in the snow. Those are all great images to have, and I try to always kind of look for those and focus on them. But it's also kind of fun to just take what it's given to you, too, and say, okay, what can I do with this, So I think it's a combination of both, and sometimes it depends on where you're going. But a trip like Alaska or Katmai for the bears, where you're camping on the ground with them, you kind of have to think about it ahead of time too, because if you don't, what kind of gear are you taking, right? And you're limited on weight in a lot of these trips, so you've got to be very specific about what gear you want, and that gear you're taking will determine some of the types of shots you can get too. Yeah. So for example, if you don't take a 70 to 200 and all you take is your 400, good luck getting any kind of landscape shots, right?
Exactly.
Unless you're quite a ways away. So just as an example, and I think I talked about this on the podcast, but Harlan, we were giving him a bunch of grief. He took his 800 millimeter to that trip, and we were all like, "What are you doing? That's insane!" Like, well, come on, you don't want to take that. You're gonna be so close to these bears. You don't need an 800 millimeter. And he just kind of, whatever. I know what I'm doing. I want to take an 800. Well, when we got back from the trip, Harlan had all these insane tight images of these heads of the bear with the fish and the teeth and the claws, all tight, full frame images that you could blow up the size of a wall, that were incredibly sharp and super bright and vibrant. And that's what he wanted. He went on that trip with those shots in his mind. That's what he wanted to capture. So it's a good example of thinking about what you want to capture on a trip, so you make sure A, you take the right gear, and B, that you're looking for those shots specifically. So
there is that level of anticipation, just one, we're obviously not in control. You want to put yourself in the best place, the best opportunity to see whatever the behaviors are. The one photo that you shared that I'm going to pull up is the shot of the two bears, kind of in the probably a bright sunny day in Alaska. We anticipate, we wait, all of the things, and for you to be able to capture an image of two bears that is almost perfectly symmetrical, I think is incredible. There's a lot of motion and energy and excitement with bears in the water, fishing, all of those things, but to have these two, I'm guessing, you probably could convince people they were trying to kill each other. It was the most intense thing ever. Right. It's probably pretty playful, but I think the symmetry is impeccable, and just you happen to capture the frame that nailed it, and one that you, as much as you want to plan and anticipate, this is one that probably just happened. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, I'll never try to take credit for that kind of stuff, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. I was wanting to get bears fighting for sure, but the fact that it turned out that way and it was so symmetrical, and that was very I was a lot of luck. Don't get me wrong. I was in the right place. I was paying attention. I took the shot, but there was a sequence of about 15 shots where that went down. So it was pretty quick. It didn't last very long, and it was, the one image out of that sequence was the one. At the rest of them, you couldn't see one of the bear's eyes, or you couldn't see, whatever. You know how it works, right? Sometimes just the little tiniest thing. And I know my camera's capable nowadays of shooting 40 frames a second, but I just don't. I shoot at 12 frames a second. That's what I shoot at. Mm-hmm. And so if a guy's shooting at 20 or 30 or 40 frames a second, you're going to be way more likely to catch that one little perfect moment. And maybe I'm dumb for not doing it right, but it's just the way I try to do it. And I still kind of like the challenge of, 12 frames a second is insane as it is. And I think about the guys back in the film days, and, that's why, not to toot anybody's horn, but there's a reason the shot that Mangelson took, right, and the falls and the bear with the fish in the mouth was so epic. And it wasn't, almost anybody can get that shot today.
Exactly.
But if you understand photography back then in the film days, that shot was absolutely incredible. And there was obviously a lot of luck involved for him too, I'm sure. But to capture that image with one frame is insane, right? And
on
so people don't
without no eye autofocus,
right.
That's incredible. And that's one of those shots that, if you're going to go to Brooks Falls, everybody wants that shot, and you've seen it 1,000 times, but think all the way back to that original one, it's a pretty incredible capture.
But it's a good for us to remember that, the technology is there to help us. And I'm just one of those guys that, I never shot in film. So, I'm over here crying about, I'm only going to shoot 12. Well, I'm limiting myself, and I'm doing it intentionally, and maybe that's dumb, like I said, but it's all personal choice, right? You guys, we all get to choose how we want to challenge ourselves, I've gone into the field before with a wide angle lens only. I've gone in the field before shooting elk or something with a 70 to 200, not a 400 or 600, and challenging myself to try to do something different. And I don't have that 400 with me to zoom in and not zoom in, but to get that tight shot. Right. I have to do something and compose something better with a wider angle. So how am I going to shoot it now? You know what I mean? Yep. So, but you know what? Go to Brooks Falls, get that shot. I haven't. When I go to Brooks eventually, I will go get that shot for sure. There's nothing wrong with that. But then while you're there, think about what you can do that's more unique and different, right? So
yeah, I think I've thought about that. I've not been there, and I probably would shoot that shot. But I think the shot that I want is, I want to get back behind the people and have people in the foreground, kind of blurry with the bears doing their thing. Just. Yeah, thinking through the story, because there so often there's an environmental story happening with most of these, and that's part of what always intrigues me with having these conversations about looking at an image of two bears that are fighting, or looking at an image of the bear walking through the water with the red salmon, and it's like there's a story that is happening before the shutter was pressed and after the shutter was pressed. And for Brooks Falls, it's like, I often think about that. Like, the story is, you're probably standing on that observation deck with, 50 other people with cameras around their necks and holding their cell phones and taking selfies. And, fortunately or unfortunately, that's probably the reality of, the story that goes with that these days.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point you make, too, is just always thinking about how you're going to tell that story, right? Does a portrait of an elk bugling tell a story? Kinda. Yeah. But, what's the story? Well, it's the rut and that bull's bugling, right? Yeah. So, and that's a fun challenge. It's a fun challenge to try to tell a story with a still image. And we're not always successful. Sometimes you just get the stills, you get the portraits, you get the typical shots, but sometimes you get lucky and you get that really cool image that really does tell a little bit more of a story, and it often in my mind including some landscape, including some other animals, including more of what's going on. And so to your point, I've never seen that shot of Brooks Falls that you just mentioned. Maybe it exists. It probably does, but I've never seen it. So and that does tell a story about Brooks Falls. Everybody knows that fish photo is taken at Brooks Falls. You can't get it anywhere else, like literally.
Yep.
So everybody knows it. So tell the story of Brooks Falls. I think
Yeah.
that's cool. So
And I think, with wildlife especially, a lot of times you're dealt the cards that you're dealt. You don't have control over the story. You hope that there's something that is evolving with it, whether it be, I think about the video that you've got of the elk fighting in the water and the intensity, and that was an epic moment. There was a story that goes with that, but like you said, an elk bugling, backlit. Is there a story? Yeah. There's a reason that that's happening, but I think some of these I think about in my non wildlife photography work in the commercial world, with working with brands and taking products and things, and you have a way of being able to craft the story a little bit more, whether it be
right.
the way somebody's holding a fishing rod, or the way, look this way, look that way, do this, do that, because it lends itself to telling that brand's story a little bit. With wildlife, we don't have that luxury.
Right.
99.9% of the time, you take what you've got, what you've been given. And I think, like we were talking earlier, it's like you put yourself in places, in positions, and make adjustments and change focal lengths and all of those things to hope to tell the story that you've maybe watched unfold in front of you, which is pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
We talked a little bit about, I mentioned at the beginning, you've got, there's a style that is Jason Loftus, I think, and that's I admired that about you. I think the defining Jason Loftus look is just kind of that. How in the world did you get a strobe onto that animal in that place? That kind of look where you've been lucky to capture some of the most iconic, wildlife imagery in amazing light. The one that you shared that I'm going to pull up is the bull elk, the bull and the cow elk in the water, with the reflection, with the mountain in the background and the pine trees, and then it looks like you've strobed these two with just the most golden light. Just talk a little bit about what happened leading up to this. It was obviously a pretty magical moment.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. I do feel like I've kind of landed on a style for sure, and it how that all begins an interesting story in of itself. But that situation, we were chasing some elk around, and we heard them bugling, and we realized that they were down at the river, and that's a really cool place to photograph them. There was about a day or an hour and a half left of light that evening, and the way the sun hits that river valley, it's gorgeous, especially when the sun gets low. So we scrambled and got down to the river bottom and found the elk, and there was a couple different bulls in there. One had kind of a part of the herd, and the other one had another part of the herd, and they were kind of just facing off and bugling back and forth at each other, trying to control their cows and keep their little harems. And the one bull, he had one cow that kept running across the river, and the image, I wish I had a little bit wider angle, to be honest with you, on that image, even though it's a pretty wide angle already. Because the real story there was that the cow kept running across the river, and he would have to go chase her and round her back up and bring her back. And if I could have just been a little wider, there's a group of cows standing on the other side of the riverbank watching, right? And to me, that would have been a much better image. I'm just being real. I just think it would have told the story better.
The story, yeah.
Right. But there's still a story there, and I like the way it ended up. You can tell that, the bull's not bugling at her, he's bugling towards the photographer, towards me. And obviously that, in my mind, that tells a story that there's another bull that he's kind of, screaming at, saying, hey, this is my cow, stay back, But the fact he was just in the process of pushing her back across the river and gave us, multiple looks, because that stinking cow kept, ticking him off, and he had to go back and forth. And I was like, oh no, not again, like, gonna give us another chance, like, holy cow, this is insane, so.
It's like in the commercial photography world, one more time, and you had him working it for you perfectly.
Yep. Yeah, it was insane. So, and that was an incredible night. Got lots of images from that night for sure. With that,
I think,
same night.
Composition-wise, and I've talked to young photographers, and in some of my teaching the one thing that I think is just incredible, whether you consciously made the effort to do it or not, but the way things lined up with, from truly like artistic standpoint, you've got the reflection, you've got this band of the bright blue, cool water with, warm light but blue cool water, and then you've got this band of dark pine trees, and then you've got a band of, the light that's hitting the pine trees on top. There's so many like layers to this, and then the subject, the bull, is lit so perfectly against that dark band, and your ability to probably, whether you crouch down, stand up, tippy toes, whatever it is, moving your camera a few feet one way, vertically or up and down,
Right.
made all the difference in the world to where that
Right.
bull was placed. I mean, incredible.
That's a good point. Well, again, thank you. You keep. I don't know. I mean, I for sure was thinking about those things. I just don't. And I guess I'm at a point where I don't like consciously think a lot about it.
100%.
But I'm at a point where for sure, like I got low. Well, guess what? I get low, I lose the reflection. So low's not the right answer. Get up higher. Now, do I have the right backdrop? I'm looking at the background. I can see the light hitting the trees in the background. I definitely want those layers. I want that light up there. I want to see that this is a valley. I don't want to be tight to just see. Now, don't get me wrong. I took some tight shots too, because I love that with the blue water reflection, the bull backlit dark background. That's a cool shot too. But that's not as much of a storyteller, in my opinion, as the bigger, wider angle one. So, and that's probably my favorite elk image I took. That whole elk rut, that one right there. So
That's cool. Cool.
But yeah, you do gotta think about those things. And you're right. Your composition can change just by feet, inches, height, how high you are, how low you are. All of it changes, and you got to always be thinking about where's the horizon at? Is it cutting through the animal? Where is it cutting through the animal? Is there any way to avoid that? If I go low, I lose reflection. Do I want the reflection? And all those things are running through your mind rapidly, as you're trying to make a composition, But
Yeah, and I've told that too, and I'm sure you have too, with new photographers, young photographers, people that are those things. The more comfortable you can get with your camera, so that the last thing that you want to be doing is look, okay, I got to change my shutter speed. I got to change this. I got to change. Like, if you can eliminate that as a variable, and then be able to process if I crouch down just a little more, I'm going to move over, I'm going to just shuffle one time to the right because I want his antlers against that dark background, or the ability to process all of those things quickly. And again, in a situation that's not a studio, we don't have the ability, we can't tell them to wait while I get things set up. That's one of the separators, I think, between, good wildlife photographers and the best of the best, is the ability to make those adjustments, see those things, process so many different things at one time to nail a shot. And sometimes it just happens. Sometimes you press the shutter and I didn't really think about that. But the good ones, and this case for you in a photo like this, to process and think about all those things really ultimately makes a great image.
Yeah, it's funny too. I think it's important for people. I think sometimes younger photographers, it's awesome that there's so many that are passionate about and getting involved. I love it. I think it's awesome. And the gear we have nowadays really shortcuts the learning curve for sure. And I think the pricing has gotten to a point where a lot of people can get into it, and that's all great in my mind. I think sometimes they hurry themselves to want to be able to just take the most epic image. And again, there's really no substitute, in my opinion. The learning curve can be shortened for sure. Some people have a natural eye for composition, and it just comes to them. Like, for me, it wasn't that way. I'm just being real. I had to learn. I had to learn how to compose things. There are so many images. I'll tell a quick story. I sent an image to Hardin one time to look. It was an elk image I took in Yellowstone National Park. I was so pumped about this image. It was a 7-point bull. This is back when there was still decent elk in the park, and before they really got decimated. And it's actually in Madison Valley, in the big meadow there in Madison. And a really nice 7-point bull was with a herd of cows and came across this meadow right in the great sunlight. And I took the photo, and I was so pumped about it. And I sent it to Harlan, and he said, "It's garbage." And I'm like, "What? You just shattered. Like, what are you talking about?" And he's like, Well, look in the background. And I was like, oh, what? Oh, wow, look at that. And there was a log coming right out of the elk's head. And it just didn't work. I mean, as soon as I saw it, it didn't work. And it crushed me. But he was right. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I've had to learn the hard way. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I still make a lot of mistakes. And every now and then you do get lucky. But every time, I think the key is every time you have an experience like that and you get an image that's a miss, you've got to really analyze it and understand why. What was it? What was wrong with this image? Why did I miss it? How do I make sure I'm paying attention to that next time?
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that it always happens either. There's times I still screw up and I have the horizons cutting through the head or something. I'm like, gosh,
Right.
dang it, you know. And
But
just,
an example like that, that's one more thing that you're going to throw into the hopper next time.
right. That's my
You're gonna
point.
say,
Yep.
hey, I remember that. I don't want that log. There's a log in that foreground. That elk's going to walk past that deadfall, and I don't want that to happen again. I mean,
Right.
all of those things go into the hopper, and
Yep.
that's, I think, to be able to take the time and take the criticism and to look at it. That's something that I'm sure you've thought about many times. Maybe not that exact.
Oh, I think
example
about
he
that
said,
exact
but-
example a lot. Trust me.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about style, your style,
Yeah.
and I think you were going to talk about that. Maybe how have you gotten to the point where you've maybe nestled into? I mean,
Oh,
sometimes
style.
it happens because you're in the right place, the right light, all of those things. But like,
Yeah.
what are some of those things that you think about? Hey, this is kind of my style, and this is the way I want to shoot it. Talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so it has gotten to a point where, I ended up getting one image, and Harlan was standing right. I'm bringing his name a lot, but we've shot a lot together. But Harlan and I were standing right next to each other and got the exact same photo, and it ended up being a photo. Long story short, that there was hope you might have seen it. I don't know. It's one of my favorite images I've ever taken, and it's because what it means to me. But it ended up being, there was a bull that was standing right. It was the big bull at Rocky Mountain National Park, and he was standing right on the shadow line, and he turned into the sun and bugled out of the shadows. And it just is perfect situation to be able to have that dark background and the bull kind of model and in kind of darkening into the shadows and the head in the light and the antler tips, and it really ended up being a really cool image. And I wasn't looking for it. I got lucky to take that shot. There's no question. But what that did is it sparked sparked in my mind like, oh, I really like that. That is really cool. I like that light play. I like the dark background. And I ended up getting lucky and that was the cover for the first issue of the North American Elk magazine. And so the first episode, and it was the first cover I got of a newsstand publication. So it meant a lot to me for those reasons too. But then that kind of is what started and sparked that style, if you will. And I think, there's lots of times I'll take images that don't have a dark background, and I share those images too. But I'm generally, when I'm out, I'm looking for that scenario. And so I think that's what's happened is, and I kind of have to challenge myself to not overdo it. You know what I mean? I don't want to be just a style, that one thing. And I was for a while, there's no question. There was a point where I was, trying to make images that weren't, if that makes sense. Like trying to take an image that wasn't that situation and through post-processing trying to make it that. And I learned real quick that that's a mistake. It's either got to be there or it's not. And if it's not, then do something different. You know what I mean? But
Yeah. So do you find yourself, let's say we walk up over a ridge into a meadow, it's golden hour. Are you looking at it going, okay, that's where the elk are. I see that ridge that's dark. I want to physically get myself down into a place where I can shoot up at them or wherever. Are you processing all of those things, would you say, as you come into a scene?
Yeah, I am actually. And a lot of it's about where the elk are in the meadow, for example, and what the backdrops are like. How much separation they have from the background to where the elk are to where I'm going to be. All those factors play into what your background ends up looking like and what aperture I want to shoot with. And, as I'm entering that situation, I'm definitely trying to analyze that. But again, I don't want to overdo it. I want those shots with the dark background, sure. And I look for it, but I also am challenging myself to look for, other styles of shots too. Like, can I get some color in the background? Can I get, like you said, the fog and the mist. And, I think I sent an image to you that was a bull elk that's just backlit, and it's a gorgeous backlit situation. Yep. And that was a situation where there was just a ton of fires. And the fires in the sky, the smoke in the sky made for just an incredible, unique lighting situation. Yeah. So that's one of those.
I was going to bring that one up because I've always said I kind of joke with other photographers. I want to start a website that's called Backlit Critters.
Yeah.
Just because I in a similar way I like trying.
Yep.
Finding that,
you do it well too. I really do. I like you. You do. I'm serious. Yeah.
Well, this image though, I love, and again, I think it's the art major in me looking at composition.
Right.
This is another one of those where I would venture to guess that you were standing and you looked at, okay, the antlers are against the mountains, but if I crouch down into this grass a little more, we're going to get the antlers are going to kind of cut that horizon, that V, those leading lines, all of those things
right
kind of made this, this
Yep.
silhouette of this elk, this giant elk, sit in the perfect spot from a composition standpoint. And then you add on the smoke and the kind of the hazy air, and it's got just a very ethereal feel to it.
Right. Yeah, it's funny, and I don't take credit for. Sometimes you're real lucky with the composition. Don't get me wrong, but these are a few examples where I moved on the trail to put myself in the right spot to get the elk where I was playing the game with the leading lines and all that for sure, and getting lower and all that for sure in that scenario. Yep. And it worked out for sure, but it doesn't always work out, and it doesn't I'm not always thinking about that, to be honest. I had time to think about it, put it that way. So
yeah, those are some of just the greatest times where there's moments of wildlife that can be a very frantic, oh my gosh, this is happening, I want to get it quick before it runs away or before this is done happening. But those moments where things kind of seem like they slow down and you do have the opportunity to think through some of that stuff, those are really special times.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny, I got a young kid. You probably Gary and Mitch, the Creek Bed Boys, right? Yep. They're such incredible people, and Mitch, shooting with him, that kid he is incredible as a photographer, and he has got an eye that's unreal. And I actually started paying attention to him. And when I first was photographing with him, I'm like, what is he doing? Whatever, like, where is it? Why is he over there? Like, we're over here. Why is he over there? And he'd come back and show us the back of his camera. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like, I'm mad I didn't see that. You know what I mean? It's just so some people just have an eye for it. But that's another little pro tip, if you will, is when you're in the field with somebody else that, you respect and that you like their style or whatever, pay attention to what they're doing. Watch them. Watch what they're doing. Watch what they're seeing. Try to pick up on what are they looking at? Why are they over there? Why are they seeing it differently?
Yep.
Quite honestly, if the whole crowd of people's here, do you really want to be there?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, sometimes, I've been there, don't get me wrong, and I still will shoot in those scenarios, don't get me wrong. But I really am trying to look for more opportunities to not be with the group, to try to be away so I can get something different, a different angle, a different look, a different style, whatever it is, right? So
for sure. It's I would like to say that I try to think that way as well, where it's like, okay, to have 6 people standing together with 400 millimeter lenses looking at the same elk, it's like, well, I venture to guess we're probably all going to end up with just about the same shot. But what if you crouch down? What if you walk over here? What if, thinking about all of those other things, I think is another, like you said, pro tip to give to folks. Like, put your camera in a place that not everybody else is always seeing things with their eyes or their camera, for that matter.
Right. Real quick, sorry, just another tip for folks that might be interested in trying to, move images and stuff. I realized recently, like, we all go to the parks, the national parks, and we all like to try to go get these big animals and stuff. And I think we're at a point, and you've probably seen this too, where most editors they don't want to publish the photos of those animals. They don't want them. because
Yep.
they're all over Instagram. They're not special anymore because there's 8 million photos of that buck out there or that bull or whatever it is. So honestly, if you're looking to move images, you probably ought to think about. I mean, it's fun to go do those shoots, right?
Yep.
But you need to probably think about diversifying your portfolio and having lots of other options for different elk that aren't as popular. You know, still trying to find a good representative of the species, but it's not one that everybody and their dog's photographing is
Exactly.
kind of the challenge nowadays, I think, you know. So,
Yeah, we talked about it, earlier. Like social media has turned into this, blessing and a curse for us,
Right.
for a lot of people. Curse in the way that you're just talking about, where kind of unfortunately these animals have gotten personalities and fame, if you will, and I don't know that that's exactly the right way of going about things, but also the blessing of social media in that you and I have developed this friendship, and we've talked to you just mentioned Gary and Mitch, and we
Yep.
talked earlier about Amy and all of these different people that without social media we may have seen their work on a magazine cover, on a campaign somewhere, but I think social media has provided us a really cool means to develop relationships, and
Yeah.
I feel blessed with the rich friendships and the times in the field that I've been able to share with people that otherwise I would have just maybe seen their name on a byline.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's important, and there is a place, and I'm super grateful for social media for so many ways. But my relationship, if you will, with social media has definitely changed. I mean, I don't post near as much as I used to. My passion for doing that has dwindled. I'm still focused on my photography, what I want to do, and that, but I don't necessarily feel like it's as important to share it on the social media as much. I don't know. I'm really in the mindset of turning off the likes and stuff. I feel like way too many people have gotten to the point where they judge their work off of how many likes they get on a photo. And you'll hear people say it. Well, that image just didn't perform as well as this one. Well, when I
It
post the
didn't hit
white
the
window
algorithm.
crop,
Yeah.
right, it doesn't do as well on social media. Who freaking cares? You know? I mean, it's easy to say, harder to do. I get that, but I'm really trying to get myself into a mindset of I appreciate my followers. Don't get me wrong. I've got a core group of followers and people that are engaged with me when I post. They're super kind, and I appreciate that, and I enjoy that that interaction. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I don't care about that, but I don't care. I'm not judging my work based off of how many comments and how many likes I get. I am got to a point where I just post what I think's cool, and if you like it, you like it, and if you don't, it's fine. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't mean it's not a cool image to me. Still, you know what I mean?
Right. I think social media is kind of like it's sort of gone over the top of the roller coaster. It was this build for a long time where we I think all of us probably were valuing all of those things. It was you were gaining followers and people were noticing and all of those things, but now it's sort of gone over the top now, where it's so much sponsored stuff and it's so much the algorithm and the trending music, and you find yourself going, well, maybe I should put that song on with the, it's like, I think Sam Soholt from up here in the upper Midwest posted a photo today and said, it was a single photo, and he said, is it still cool just to post one photo at a time on Instagram? And it's like, man, that's kind of where this started, and there's a beauty to that. And I think I'm hearing you say, and I feel the same way, where it's like I just kind of want to go back to like post an image that I like, and I don't really care what everybody else thinks. And the core group of people that I probably care about in my world, they like it and they care, but who cares what everybody else thinks, and whether it hits the algorithm correct or not.
Right. Right, and I'll be honest with you, if you're trying to do it for a business purpose, that's probably not a smart approach. I'm just being real. Like, if you are trying to grow your page for business reasons and connections to have, folks that want to do tour, I mean, whatever it is, then you kind of got to play the game. You got to understand that's got to be your mindset. You got to put the reels up with you got to put the catchy music and the trending music and all those things, and I'm kind of at a point where I just, the carousels are a big deal right now, like to Sam's point, right? You just post a bunch of photos so people have to sit there on that one and scroll through them. And they're starting to reward you for posting carousels with trendy music. And I've gotten to the point just kind of almost like just I don't really care. I actually look for like songs I like that mean nothing, have nothing to do with the post itself, and it's just a song I like, and it has zero reels or zero, and it's like, there, take that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of a, I don't know. It's just my own little way of saying I don't care about your algorithm, you know what I mean? But yeah, but anyways, social media is cool for, you're right, all the people we've met, and we have a core group of folks that we all kind of associate with each other, and sometimes we don't chat for months at a time, but it's always one of those things where I know if I reached out and asked a question, you'd be more than willing to help me out, and vice versa. And there's a core group of us that I think we have those relationships, and we never would have had them if it weren't for social media. So
For sure.
definitely a
For sure.
double-edged sword, But
People ask me a lot about the competition. Tell me, asking about my competition, and I've just never felt like, why would there be competition? Like, if I see, Jason's got the cover of Bugle magazine, I'm like, heck yeah, man, that's like, what an awesome photo. Or there's never, like, that's one of the cool things about this, kind of this community, I think, is that we're not competing against each other for a cover or for likes or for, it's like we all just, we love the same things, and we love to see epic stuff from each other. And I, like, at least for me, I don't feel that. I don't feel, any level of competition or jealousy. It's just like, man, I just want to see my friends doing cool stuff, and I'm just really happy for them when it does happen. So
yeah, I'll tell a quick funny story, and Sam might get mad at me for calling him out, but I don't think he'd care, but it's funny. I don't know if you know who Sam Zerke is, but he's a photographer that's photographed just monster mule deer for years and years and years, and he's such a good guy, just a stud of a guy. And I'm lucky and fortunate to call him a friend now. But when we used to trade back and forth with Mule Deer Foundation on covers, and it became this adversarial, like, that sucker, he got the cover this time, and who is this Sam guy? Like, God, this guy's ticking me off, and that was early on in my photography career, if you will, whatever you want to call it. But funny, I met him in the field one day, and we both were kind of like avoiding each other, and kind of we knew who each other were, and we were kind of avoiding each other and stuff. And I finally, he was sitting there parked, and I walked up and said, "Hey, man, what's going on? I'm Jason." He's like, "Yeah, I know who you are, blah, blah, blah." And we started talking, and we hit it off, and we were laughing within about 20 minutes about how stupid that was and how silly it was. And, we became pretty good buds. And I talked to him about once a year, and we run him to a field every now and then. And, we both wish each other the best of success. I'm happy when he's successful, and he's happy when I'm successful. And, that taught me a lesson. It taught me a lesson early on that it's not about the competition, and there's plenty of room to go around. If you think you're going to make a living nowadays by strictly doing wildlife photography that gets published, you're kidding yourself. So, I mean, you got to ask yourself why you're doing this, right? And always try to keep that frameworked. Why are you doing this? What's your point of doing this? Is it for you? Is it for the art? Or are you trying to make a living with it? And if you are trying to make a living, then you've got to realize that you're going to have to diversify, I think, anymore. Almost every photographer, videographer I know nowadays, they're very successful, yourself included, but I'm positive you're very diversified in what you're doing. You're not just doing photos, you're doing video work, you're doing lots of stuff, right? I'm positive you are. I don't even know that for sure, but I guarantee you are, but
And I think what you just said, though, I think is important to keep in mind. Like, I think all of us would say if it was only a business, we wouldn't enjoy it much. You said, am I doing it for myself? Yes. Am I doing it for the art? Yes. Am I doing it to make a living? Yes. Am I doing, there's so many reasons that all kind of filter into that funnel, which I think is also, it's kind of a beautiful thing. It's like if it was all about just how much money was I making at it, I mean, we'd probably all just be grinding away, and like, it just wouldn't be what it is. But you get, there's so many reasons that we do what we do. And again, back to the top, we're like, pretty lucky that we do get to do all of those.
Very lucky.
All
Very
those things.
lucky. Yep, for sure.
I did want to ask you, kind of as we get towards wrapping it up here. You talked mule deer a few times, and I know you are just so passionate about mule deer. You've got the image with the one muley with the snow-capped mountains in the background, and I was thinking about it earlier when we were kind of talking about that, positioning yourself and your camera, and that's another one of those where, in a seemingly pretty intentional way, you probably made some adjustments to the way you shot that and framed it. Talk a little bit about maybe just the technical part of this, but I know that photo has some special meaning for you as well.
Yeah, so it's funny. I was in a public place. There's other people around for sure. There's one of the bigger bucks that everybody was photographing, and I knew this buck, that buck there. He's a stud buck, and I knew that buck was around, but he was in an area that was kind of hard to get to, and he wasn't coming out a lot. But I knew that backdrop, and I knew he was in that area, was just going to be the shot. And so I just kept going back there, morning after morning, and I kind of was just playing that, hoping that it would unfold for me. And one of the mornings I went in there, and the buck, there was a doe, and the doe was starting to get a little bit hot, and he was kind of rutting on her and sniffing and pushing her a bit, and she was not wanting him to mess with her, so she was continuing to come out of the trees, and I could see that they were working up this hill. And just knowing deer behavior, they were coming out to feed, and they were working their way up this little ridge line, and I was just like, oh, please, just keep going. And just one of those where played the waiting game, took some shots when I could, but I knew the shot I wanted was the one that I got there, fortunately. But waited for them to work themselves up onto the hill, knowing knowing behavior a little bit, and waited for it to happen. And then they got up on top of the hill, and I've actually got a series of shots where he's kind of doing the sneak on her, and she's, peeing. And as as soon as that happens, the pee's down, and he's sneaking, and here comes the lip curl. And so I got, the lip curl series with the doe in the frame. I got when she left and him still lip curling, and then him standing and look. He gave us the look, thank goodness, turned and looked at us before he decided to leave. And, just that whole series, and it lasted about maybe 3 minutes, but it was just epic. I was just ripping shots, but the point is I did try to foresee that unfolding, and I took some risk. I took some risk of missing other shots to try to get that shot. Yeah. And that's something I haven't been so good at doing in my career. I've been kind of the guy that's been wanting to, not miss the stuff. The FOMO's real, right? Yeah. So, but I've learned that, every now and then it pays off, and there's not very many people that have that shot. That shot of that buck there's not a lot of people that have it. So to me, it's more special, right? To me, it's something that I was able to foresee, and the way it unfolded, it means more to me. And I know there's not a lot of that photograph out there, so it makes it unique. Well,
and again, technically beautiful composition, kind of low angle, mountains in the background. There's a lot of story that goes with that I think is, kudos to you.
I appreciate that.
A little bit, but getting the shot. Kind of as we wrap up, tell us a little bit about Beyond the Wild, and you've got a great relationship, I know, with Picture Line. Beyond the Wild has kind of come, resurrected itself from the previous show and started over, and you guys obviously just are some of the go-tos in the podcast world. Talk a little bit about the podcast and Picture Line and some of the relationships you've got there.
Yeah, so it used to be Beyond the Wild, Wild and Exposed podcast, and I was a co-host on that with Mike and Mark and Ron for quite a while. And then things kind of wound down with that podcast. We'd been doing it for about 5 years. And there was some, creative differences, if you will. I think, there was a couple that wanted to go try something different, do something a little different, take a different approach. And so we kind of took a break, and then it was obvious that we weren't going to continue with that platform. So Ron and I and Mark decided we wanted to continue with a, rebrand and start up again. And so we did, and we rebranded with the Beyond the Wild, and we're able to find a sponsor in Picture Line and Canon right off the bat, it's just been incredible. We're super grateful to them. Picture Line's an incredible sponsor, and they do so much in the community for photographers and for youth and so on and so forth that, it's just we're lucky to have them as a sponsor, and we're lucky to have Canon as part of that too. So, we about a year and a half ago, we, kicked it off, and we're doing 2 episodes a month, and that really, we realized that the cadence wasn't probably right, and we really felt like we could do 4 a month again, 1 every week. So we kind of got into that groove, and now we're at a point where I think we're on episode 50, and we're, pumping out 1 a week, and, excited about the future. It's been a fun journey and a fun process. And again, what's cool and selfishly is, we don't make a lot of money doing it. It's hardly anything, but it's a passion project for sure. And we get to meet so many cool people and hear their stories and create those relationships that last over time just because of this shared passion we have. And it doesn't matter what political background you have or what other issues you might disagree on. This is that one thing that brings us together. And I think that's important nowadays with all the divided, people getting upset with each other because of some view, and people canceling family over stupid things like politics and stuff. And I'm just being real. That's just how I feel. I don't care. You can hate me, you can unfollow me, whatever you want. But I'm an open book when it comes to my beliefs on that stuff. And I think it's insane that you would ever let something like that affect your relationships. So. But,
and I think you guys have the 3 of you come from you're 3 distinctly different guys shooting different stuff, different locations, different styles, but I think you guys you weave together all of those things in a real pretty awesome way. And again, it's a place that you can leave all of that other stuff at the door and come and have conversations, and for people that are out there to be able to listen to or watch shared passions and not worry about the controversy of any of it. It's a place that I think is just really valuable in our industry, that we're able to have. You can take an hour a week or whatever and put the headphones on and enjoy that and tune everything else out. So great job with you guys, and best of luck as you continue. And thanks to Picture Line, I don't, I just know them through you guys, and it's been a great relationship seemingly. So
yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I really appreciate that, Matt. I think any of us that are doing this stuff and just trying to help tell stories and share people's passions is a positive thing for sure. And I'm sure it doesn't do much for some people, and that's okay. There's other options out there for sure. And I try to support any of the wildlife, or not necessarily wildlife, but the outdoor photography podcasts that I can find. I think it's important. There's some good ones out there, and some people that are really doing some good stuff with them, and with different guests and so on. So, don't limit yourself to just one of them. If you enjoy podcasts, there's a lot out there to check out too, for sure. But we appreciate the support for sure, and we love to have interaction with the listeners. We get lots of listener questions, and we love those episodes and stuff. So yeah, we love the engagement with folks. But
yeah, and I think it's cool that you though the 3 of you are extremely accomplished in the industry, it's a place that amateurs and newbies and young and old and everybody can kind of come and learn some stuff, and enjoy the entertainment and the the pro tips and all of the things. I think it's a great place that we all can meet. So
yeah, cool.
Kudos to you guys.
We like to banter for sure. We have some fun. So
for sure. Well, hey, I couldn't appreciate you coming on and taking the time. It's great to visit with you. I really hope that sooner than later we get to spend some time in the field together, and wonder why are you crouching down and laying over in those weeds over there, and look at the back of each other's cameras and see if we can figure out why. But thanks a million for coming on. And like I said, from the beginning, I'm just a guy that I really respect your work and you as a person and what you do in our industry. So thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you, Matt. And that's a two-way street for sure. You're an incredible guy with some incredible work, and I love seeing your success. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be on. I'm honored. So
awesome. Well, thanks for joining us again for this episode with Jason Loftus, and join us again next time, whenever that is, for the next episode. But again, Jason, thanks for joining us today, and we'll catch everybody next time.
See you soon.